There are three types of Eruvin. There's Eruvei Tavshilin, which enables a person to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. There's Eruvei Tchumim, which speaks about how you can, even though a person has 2,000 amos to go out of his place, through an Eruv it is possible to go twice that amount. And there's Eruvei Chatzeiros, which permits people to carry from their houses into their yard. I'm going to speak solely about Eruvei Chatzeiros. On all of these three Eruvin, when one makes them, they make a bracha, shekidshon v'soso etzivonu al mitzvahs eruv. If a person makes two Eruvim at the same time, like on Erev Pesach, you might make Eruvei Chatzeiros and Eruvei Tavshilin. In such a case, there's a machlokes in the poskim, whether you say, you make both of them together and you say al Eruvei Chatzeiros, al Eruvei Tavshilin, or if you say al mitzvahs Eruvin, rather. But you say Eruvin, always you should make each one separate because they know some mitzvahs chavilas. The Mishnah Berurah seems to go like those poskim who say that you say al Eruvei Tavshilin and you make both of them together. What is Eruvei Chatzeiros? Eruvim, if let's say you have two places where people live. One family lives in one half of a house and the other family lives in the other side of the house. Let's say it's a duplex. And there's a door that between the two can be opened, but usually it's locked because they're two separate households. They are not allowed to carry from, if they want to open the door and carry from one apartment to the other apartment, they cannot do that without Eruvei Chatzeiros. Now let's try and understand this. From the Torah, there is a Rishus HaRabim, there's a Rishus HaYachid. Rishus HaRabim is a place which is more than 16 amos wide and is made for the Rabbim to walk through. Rishus HaYachid is a place which is enclosed by mechitzas. So even the public library, which is meant for the Rabbim, but it's a Rishus HaYachid because it has 4 mechitzas around it. There is the Chacham, Min HaTorah, you're not allowed to carry from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid, and not from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. There is a Carmelist, which the Chacham designated as a different Rishus, which is a place that has no mechitzas, but is not made for the public to go. So if a street is considered Rishus HaRabim, the lawn in front of your house, which is not meant for the public to walk on, is considered a Carmelist. Now, you cannot carry, the Chacham said, you cannot carry from a Rishus HaYachid or a Rishus HaRabim into a Carmelist, nor from a Carmelist into either of them. And Eruv Chatzeiros will not help. Now, such a thing as a Mokum B'Tur, which is none of these three, but there you can allowed to carry from either of these, either Rishus HaYachid or Rishus HaRabim, without an Eruv Tavshilin. So where do you need Eruv Tavshilin? Only from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid. And Shlomo HaMelech made this gzeira, because since they look like separate domains, that this is the Rishus of one person and this is the Rishus of the other one, and if you can, even though in HaTorah you're allowed to carry from one to the other, but Shlomo HaMelech saw that if we will permit that, people will not be able to make the distinction between if you can carry from one domain to another domain, this person's private place to someone else's private place, they would make the mistake and carry from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim also. So therefore, he made this takana that you cannot do it without an Eruvei Chatzeiros. You cannot carry from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid without Eruvei Chatzeiros. So therefore, if you want to make an Eruv around a property that has various people living in this property, and that everyone should be able to carry there's a problem over here, because each person's abode, each person's place of living belongs to him exclusively, whereas the yard belongs to all of them together. So there's a different ownership. One is a single ownership, one is a communal ownership. And you cannot carry, no person can carry from his house into the place which has been surrounded with mechitzas, so to speak, even though you have the mechitzas up, where it's made from tzuras HaPesach, or made from walls, or whatever, fences, or whatever it's made from, you still cannot carry without Eruvei Chatzeiros. So when you make an Eruv around the city, it's the same thing. You cannot carry there even after you've finished all what we call an Eruv, as a misnomer. It's not really an Eruv, that's mechitzas. After you made the mechitzas, you still need Eruvei Chatzeiros to be able to carry from your house into the street, or from the street into your house, or in anyone's house. So the Gemara actually says that when Shlomo Melech made this takana, the Rebbeinu Shalom was very happy that it was a very necessary takana. So these mechitzas, which are necessary before we make the Eruvei Chatzeiros, is, I'm not getting into what's considered mechitzas and not considered mechitzas. But basically, mechitzas are that, at least from a halacha standpoint, this place where the Eruv is going to be made has to be halachically acceptable mechitzas that surround the whole place. And Eruvei Chatzeiros only helps when we're dealing with the Rishus HaYachid. What's the concept of the Eruv? That you take food from every person in this who's going to be part of this Eruv. You take food and you put it into one of the houses, and now everyone is considered, since a person is he's interested in eating, and therefore we say that wherever a person's food is, that's where his main place of living is considered. And since you've taken from each person food and you put it into this person's house, all the other houses are considered like guests by him. And in the same way, if a person in his house, he has a separate room for his son, and a separate room for his daughter, and a separate room for him and his wife. You don't need an Eruv over there, because it's all one household. Through the Eruv, we made it into one household. That Eruv has to be there before the beginning of Shabbos, when Shabbos starts. And if for whatever reason in the middle of Shabbos an animal came and ate it, or whatever, it got lost or got burnt, or whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. As long as the beginning of Shabbos it was okay. Ben Hashmashas, that's when you make the Eruv. It's good for the whole Shabbos. But if the mechitzas break in the middle of Shabbos, then all carrying has to stop. Because now we're not dealing with the problem of a Eruvei Chatzeiros anymore. We're dealing now with the problem of carrying from a Karmelis. It's not Rishus HaYachid anymore. It's a Karmelis, and carrying from a Karmelis into Rishus HaYachid or into Rishus HaRabim is forbidden. What kind of food do you have to put into a person's house? That's I'll discuss that. So if a person has guests and they eat by him, even if they're sleeping in a different place, in a different apartment within a different apartment, even out of the area of what she wants to make, they're considered his guests, and they do not need a special Eruv, because they're part of his household. Now we're talking about real guests. But if a person actually lives in one place and eats in another place, and the question is, where is his main place of living that he has to make the Eruv? It is in the place where he eats and not in the place where he sleeps. So this whole discussion is only if you want to carry from your house, which is into the yard, which is shared by two people or more. But in the house, even if you didn't make an Eruv Chatzeiros, you can carry, because it's one rishus. And in something which was in the yard from before Shabbos, you're allowed to carry in the yard, even though it belongs to two people, because you're not taking it from one rishus to another rishus, you're taking it from this place which had two people that own it, and it didn't go from one to the other. So if you have, let's say, two houses attached, and there is a long porch in front of both of them, and the porch is used by both, the whole length of the porch could be used by both. That's the case we're talking about. There's a fence around the porch, and the porch is owned by two people, and each house is owned by one. Now, if there's a division in the middle of the porch, which doesn't have a door in it, so then your porch is only for your use, so then you don't need an Eruv. The other one's the same thing. If there's a door between the two of them, and they want to keep the door closed for Shabbos, that's no problem. If they want to be able to carry from one to the other, then, and they're going to leave this door open, then it is considered this porch belongs to two people, and then you would need an Eruv to carry from your house into the porch, or from the porch into your house. But things that are left on the porch, you can carry on the porch without any Eruv. So if the person is living in an apartment house that has 3 floors, and there are 2 apartments on each floor, so to carry from his apartment on the top floor to into the hall, he needs an Eruv with the other person who lives on that floor. Now, if he's only one person on the top floor, he doesn't need any Eruv, because he's the one who has the rights to this hall, and there's no one else. But if he wants to carry from the top floor to the second floor to the first floor, now he does need an Eruv, even if there's only one person living on each floor, because he has the rights to the second floor also. How is he supposed to get out of the house? And he has rights to the first floor. So basically, there's one person who has rights on the hall on the top floor. No Eruv needed to carry from his house onto the hall on the top floor, or vice versa. If he wants to carry from the top floor to the second floor, he needs an Eruv, and the person on the second floor also needs an Eruv. And certainly on the first floor, that all 3 of them would need an Eruv, because that belongs to 3 people. Now, sometimes you have a situation where there's one yard that opens up to the street, and then there's a second yard which opens up to the first yard, and there's no other exit from the people in the innermost yard to get out in the street without going through the outer yard, which opens up to the street. So basically, in the inner yard, there's only one person living there. He can carry over there from his house to his yard, but he doesn't need an Eruv. We're talking now, there's a fence between the 2 of them. There's a gate there that you can walk through, or a door, but he can only use the yard by himself. Now the question is, he has rights to walk through the outer yard to get to the street. Now, he doesn't have a right to use the outer yard. He just has a right to go through it. The question is, by the fact that he has a right to go through, is that enough to say that the person in the outer yard cannot use it unless he makes an Eruv with a person from the inner yard, because they can leave the door open, and even though his house opens up to his inner yard, but since he has to go through the outer yard, it is considered like he's shut from over there. Or we say, no, they don't have a right to use it, he only has a right to go through it. So the halacha is like this, that if the inner yard is allowed to carry in his place, he does not require the one in the outer yard to make an Eruv with him. And they can carry, the one in the outer yard can carry. But if there's, let's say, 2 people in the inner yard or more, then he needs an Eruv. If he made an Eruv, it's fine. Then the outer yard, if there's only one person, doesn't need an Eruv to carry from his house into the yard. But if he didn't make an Eruv, then the person in the outer yard cannot carry unless they make an Eruv together, because the way Chazal say it, regel hamuteres b'mkaima, if he only has a schus of regel to go through it, and in their own yard, the inner one has a right to carry from the house into that yard, muter shloim kaima, that in the shloim kaima in the outer yard, he does not asa. But regel hasura b'mkaima, if in his yard he can't carry without an Eruv, and he didn't make an Eruv, then it's a shloim kaima is considered as if he has he will asa outside, that they will have to make an Eruv, even there's only one person living there. So if you have an apartment house that there's like an entranceway, and from that entranceway, there's just two people living here, and there's an entranceway, and from that entranceway there's 2 front doors for the 2 apartments. Each of them can carry in their apartments, but if they want to carry from their apartments into that entrance hallway, they cannot do it unless they make an Eruv. Now, there is a halacha that if the owner of the landlord, he rented out apartments, that if he has the right to leave something in every apartment, he rented out the apartments, but he asked them for permission to leave something there. If this thing is something which is either muktzah, or if it's heavy, which means that if he put it there before Shabbos, it's going to stay there for Shabbos, and he has permission to do that, he has over here some rights in each of the apartments. And since he has some rights over there, it is considered as if he's the sole owner of everything, even though he rented it out, and he can, you don't need an Eruv. So of course this is talking that this is talking either that he has the right to leave it, or if he bought the right and he didn't actually put anything there, but he has the rights to do that, so then he is considered an owner of everything, and you don't need any Eruv. If the owner is, now this is talking that when you say it's muktzah, because he's not going to take it out, that the owner is a shomer Shabbos. But if the owner is a machal Shabbos, or is not a yid b'chalal, then since he might take it out on Shabbos as muktzah doesn't mean anything. But if it's heavy, so then that's meaningful, because he's not going to take it out. But the Magen Avraham asks the question, it's heavy. What's the shear of heavy? How heavy does it have to be? Therefore, the Magen Avraham says you should not rely on that. The earlier rabbi also says that, but the other poskim say, some poskim say that if it's heavy enough that it's difficult to move it, that's considered heavy. Others say, the Marsham says, you have to pick it up with two hands. You can't pick it up with one hand, it's too heavy. So then it's also considered heavy. For sure, if you need two people to carry it like a refrigerator, that it is, he has the right to keep his refrigerator there because he has to store it someplace, so he puts it over there. So then all these places are considered like that he has something heavy over there. It's considered like he still has some kind of rights over here, and it is not needed. Eruv is not needed. It doesn't make any difference whether the people in this place are Yidden or Goyim, or if the landlord is a Goy. It doesn't make any difference. So I asked, and they're considered like guests by him. So I asked Moshe Feinstein, whether this heta only applies in a case where the landlord lives together with them within the Eruv area. When saying Eruv area, I mean talking that the place is confined by mechitzas. So maybe then you could say they're guests by him, but if he lives somewhere else, or certainly if he lives in a different town, maybe you don't say that. So Moshe took out the Rambam, and he took out the Rosh, and he looked here, there. Finally he said that no one seems to say that the landlord has to be there, so he doesn't have to be there. So I'm not sure whether he took out the Rambam and the Rosh, whether he took it out because he hadn't heard the Shiloh before, and he wanted to make sure that he got the right psak, or he didn't want me to feel that I'm asking a foolish question, so he took out the Ram and the Rosh to make it feel like an important question. I'm not sure. Now, Rav Moshe Feinstein has in a tshuva, I think it's in Eruchaim Simon Aleph, maybe Simon Kuf Mem Aleph, something like that. That what happens if the landlord has a refrigerator in each apartment, because that's part of the rental agreement, and he is actually as part of the rent. He had a right to, I think in New York City there were some laws that you can charge more if you have a refrigerator, whatever, it doesn't make any difference. Is that also considered that he has rights in this apartment? Because maybe the only time, if he keeps his own things over there, he has a refrigerator that's not being used, and he keeps in your apartment, okay. So that shows that has some ownership here. But if he's renting it to you also, that maybe in such a case it doesn't help. So actually the Yad Avram from the Kovna Rav says that it's only if he has something which is his and he's trying to find a place to keep it, that shows that he has some tfisas yad over here, but not if it's rented. But Rav Moshe says that when you rent this, when he's basically renting the apartment and renting this refrigerator, a seicha has responsibility to make sure that nothing happens to the article that he rented. And he's chayev on einus, and einus happens, but he has responsibilities. So he's actually holding it also for the bailam, because that's his responsibility to make sure that nothing happens to it. And therefore, that also is considered tfisas yad. So this happens to be machlokes in the later poskim, and someone wants to be mekel over here, so there's what to be mekel, especially Rav Moshe passes that way. Now, it's the only time that we have a problem of taking from one. We say he has rights to walk through. It's only if he has rights to walk through from a different chatzah which is attached to a house. So then when you have one chatzah towards the road, and then another one that's it's towards the deeper in, so the inner one is a chatzah of a house. But it's not, has nothing to do with the house, it's just a piece of land, then these restrictions don't apply. It doesn't matter if they have rights to go through. It is, as long as you can't use it for any else besides walking through, or people walk through, it doesn't disturb the fact that the outside person, if he's by himself, that he can carry there, or if he made an Eruv just with the people on the outside, chatzah, that it's sufficient. There's a question about a shul. What happens if the shul, which used to be in Europe, that they used to have a place for urchim, for guests, that if the person came into a city and he had no place to stay, the question was, what does he, where does he stay? So in the same way that there was achnosas urchim, and it was usually often, let's say, attached to the shul. So when you walk out of the shul, there was like a chatzah, and over there they had rooms for people who who need a place to stay. And that's the reason why some shuls, the minhag is to make kiddush in shul on Friday night, to be mitzi those urchim with kiddush. So the question is, if you don't have any urchim, so do you still make the kiddush or not? Was it takans chachamim or not? And that is the difference of places that do make kiddush and places that do not make kiddush. Now the question is that this this room where they stood, it opens up into the chatzah of the Beis HaKnesses. And all the people walk out of shul go through the chatzah Beis HaKnesses. So, and what happens if especially some people have bought seats in the shul, and or they're shutfim in the shul, do they make it asa for the one who lives in the arich, the guest who lives in this room, which also opens up into the chatzah, that he can't carry from his room into the chatzah without an eruv? Or do we say he's just one person, so then it doesn't matter? So the only time they do it asa is only if they're coming from a beis dira, a place where you live. And a shul is not considered a place where you live. So there are differences of opinion. Is a shul considered a place where you live, or is it not considered a place where you live? So some poskim say that it's a place where you live, and asa. Most poskim say that a shul is not considered a beis dira, so therefore even though there may be 100, 200, 500 people walking through this chatzah, it is on the way home from shul, and the way to shul, it's not going to asa this person who lives in a room off the chatzah Beis HaKnesses, it's not going to asa him carrying into the from his room into the hall, because shul is not considered a beis dira, and that seems to be the Rav Paiskim. Now, what happens if people eat in the shul? So very often for Shor Sudas, people eat in the shul, so then it becomes a little bit more tricky. Even so, there are many Paiskim who say that a shul is not considered a beis dira. So how do you make the eruv? So in the times of the Gemara, it seems that everyone used to give a certain amount of bread. Actually, you need a groigorus, which is a machlokes, whether it is a third of an egg, or it is close to half an egg. It basically depends what the shir of Kedei Achilas pras is. According to Rashi, it's 4 beim. According to the Rambam, it's 3 beim. And the easy way to remember that is that Rashi has 3 letters in his name, and the Rambam has 4. So Rashi has 3, says it's 4. The Rama was 4 letters in his name, it says it's 3. And it depends on that. And the Mishnah Berurah says that lechatchila should be machmeh. So it's a half a beya. Each one, they've till 18. Once there's more than 18 gregorous, then that's all you need. But it has to be a double shalem. So typically, the eruv is made out of matzah, because bread gets moldy after a while. And as long as you made the eruv initially kosher and you left it there in one of the houses, then that eruv can be good for many weeks. You don't have to replenish it each week as long as no one ate it. And the eruv has to be possible anyone who wants to eat it can eat it. So you use matzahs, because matzahs are actually a good over Pesach, and there's going to be at least one Shabbos over Pesach where you're going to have to carry, so you need something which is kosher for Pesach. And then matzahs usually are, if you keep them in a place where no vermin will come to eat it, so they should last for a whole year without getting moldy. Now, if you leave it in a very humid place, they also can get moldy, so if that's the case, you might check them. But they have to be in a place where anyone can eat it, and no one should be makbid no one should be makbid if anyone else eats it. So if you want to use a roll which you made for Shabbos, or you bought for Shabbos, you should not use it for the eruv, because you are going to be makbid that someone else shouldn't eat it, because otherwise you won't have lechem mishnah which you prepared for Shabbos. And but more practical, what is done, one person buys a box of matzahs, which for sure has Yudches Gregorus in it, kosher Pesach matzahs, and usually we make it on Erev Pesach. And so this person is mezaka these matzahs to everyone who lives in the Chatzeiros. Now, when you're mezaka to everyone who lives if everyone's in the Chatzeiros, each person should get, if there are more than 18 people over here, so they all have a chelik in this, and if there's less than 18, you have to mezaka McGregor's for each one. And then you have to mezaka through someone else. You can't be mezaka just by picking up and say, these matzahs should belong to someone else. You have to give it to someone else who should be zeicha for them. Now, this person, of course, has to be someone who has his own household. You can't give it to your children, even though they may be gedolim, if they're relying on you for their support. I mean, they are samchom al shulchanai, they eat by you, and they're supported by you, you can't do that. So you go to someone else and you say, or one of the people who live in this chatzah, and you say that you should be zeichen it for all the people. Then you take it back from them and you make the bracha shekechanu v'sasav v'sivanu al mitzvahs eruv. And after that you say, Ba'adein eruva, with this eruv, yeshal lana, it should be permitted for us, lahitzim and abatim l'chatzah, from the house into the chatzah, and a chatzah l'batim, and the rest of the nusach, which is mentioned in the when you make the eruv. Now that all is good if everyone who's living in the chatzah are Yidden, but if there are any Yehudim, then it doesn't help to. So not only that, but even the Yid, if he's not someone who Shomer Shabbos, he's not a Moed B'Erev, then also it doesn't help. The Chachamim didn't make this takana that it should help. From them you have to buy the rishus. Buy the rishus means you've got to go to them and you say, I want to buy your rights over here in this area. So if he sells it to you, he's going to give you money, and I want to rent them. So you've got to give him money, rather. You give him money, and he will sell to you. You make a king with the money. I remember when I was coming from Europe to America in about 70 years ago, and we were coming on a boat. That was before people used to fly. So my parents were there with their family, with all their children at that time. We were on a boat. So we had a cabin, and then there were the place where they ate was a different place. We had to bring all the food because there was very little that we could eat from them. The truth is, the first 3 days we were seasick and couldn't eat anything anyway. But then comes Shabbos. So the question is, you have to carry certain things, some fruit which they gave us so that you could eat, whole fruit. But how did you carry it? So my father, Olva Shalom, went to the captain to buy rishus of the boat from him, because there were other Eden also over there, and so in order to carry, you had to buy the rishus. Most of the people were going. My father was a little bit nervous, like, how am I going to explain to this captain that I want to buy the rishus from you and not have to carry it from the cabin into the hallway? And he was nervous. He went over to the captain. He said to him, I'm going to have a strange request which I'm going to ask you. He said, oh, you want to buy the boat for me? He said. So my father was not the first one who had asked for that. So in other words, he'd been going this route from Europe to America already many times, and there was always some from here who went to Nassau. So maybe the first one had a problem, but Baruch Hashem, my father was very relieved. You didn't have to explain him anything. Yeah, I'll rent you the whole boat, no problem. And so therefore we were able to carry. So the problem is like this. Everyone has to be able to eat this Eruv. And since everyone has to be able to eat the Eruv, what happened? And the Eruv was put into one of the houses. Why? What happens if the one in whose house it is went away for Shabbos? He locked his apartment, can't get in. So how's this Eruv kosher? All right. So the Achronim speak about this, and they say the following: the Eruv is koine bein hashmoshes. So it has to be available for anyone to eat bein hashmoshes. If bein hashmoshes it was available to eat, but later on Shabbos it wasn't, they weren't able to eat, it doesn't matter. Even though they disappeared, it got ruined. It's still kosher because it was kosher bein hashmoshes. Now, bein hashmoshes, the Gazru al Shvus bein hashmoshes, the Chacham not goes on a Shvus. So if I have to break down his door, which is Mekalkel and is only also Midrabanan, so then it's a Shvus. So since I could break down the door of his house or break a window and get in, so bein hashmoshes, so therefore it's considered a good Eruv. Even though, of course, I'm not going to do that, but since I could do it, that's all you need to be able to do it. The Prima Goim says, what happens? There's a question like this: what happens if he's here for Shabbos, but someone died in his house, and he's going to stay in the house over Shabbos? You can't do too much with the mace on Shabbos. Now a kohen can't go into this house. So how is the kohen? The kohen is not going to be able to eat this food, and if any person can eat the food, so then the Eruv doesn't help for anyone. So how does Eruv help in such a case? So there are different opinions over here. The Sefer Minchas Yehuda says that the Chacham will only makbid that the mokum should be roy for anyone to come, but if the kohen can't come because of his problem, because he can't go in a place where there's a mace, that is not considered a problem. And besides that, he says, even though you can't take the mace out on Shabbos, but ben hashmoshes, you could either tell a guy to to take it out. It goes all and so they were not goes on a guy to tell a guy. And therefore, since I can tell the guy to take it out, and actually it's a muktzah, which is also a shvus, so therefore Ben Hashmoshe was okay. But the Pri Megadim says that maybe that is the reason why you make an Eruv for a town or for a larger area, that we put the Eruv into the shul. Put the Eruv into the shul because it's unusual that there be a mace, Ben Hashmoshe in a shul. If he's usually he doesn't feel well before he dies, and then he wouldn't come to shul, and so therefore that way you get out of that problem. So it seems the Pri Megadim actually might he might think that it is a problem. So the minig is that we changed. If you have an Eruv for a town, there of course you have to rent it from the town also. So we have an Eruv in Baltimore, and as I said, I'm not going to talk about the mechitzas, which had to be made around the whole town, or a part that was used by the Yidden, but we had to go and buy the rishus. So we went to the city and to the mayor, because you don't have to buy from the owner. I guess the owner of the town is the people. But you can buy from Schira Ulakita, someone who is a worker for the town is considered also sufficient to buy the rishus from them. But if you have an apartment house and there are people over there who are not Jewish, who live together with Jewish people who are Yehudim, then you have to go to each person who is ein Yehudi and buy the rishus from them. Because well, what about the landlord? Can he sell it, the rishus for everyone? Or what about the custodian, one who takes care of the building? He's a schira l'kitay of the owner. But once he has already rented to them and gave them the rights to use it, he can't go and rent it to the afterwards. He already rented it. So it's only can work if he has the rights any month to evict the tenant. If you can tell any tenant, you're only on a day-to-day basis or on a month-to-month basis, then for after that time he does have the rights, and then he can sell at that time for that time. But if he sold them for a year, and especially if the law is that you can't evict the tenant after a year either, unless you want to use the apartment for yourself, which he doesn't want to do, so then it's not so simple that you can do it with a landlord or with the custodian. But so you have to go to each tenant and buy from him. Now, if the tenant moves out and someone else comes instead, so then so the new one has to rent to the place again. And if the tenant dies and his Yerush on a Harrison takes it over, you have to go to the Yerush. And you don't say that he only Yarshan what his father left over and he already rented it out to you. You don't say that. So there are, so over here, we went to the mayor, who is the elected by the populace, and he's the one who is in charge of the town. So we went to him, and he didn't know what to do with this, and he went to the state's attorney's office and looked over the request, and he said to us, the state's attorney office says, if we would agree to this, you can stop all the traffic in the town, and there's no way that we can that we can get out of this. So we can't do that. The Baruch Hashem helped, and there was a Fruma Yid who worked, a lawyer who worked in the state's attorney's office. His name was Reb Chaim Wallen, and he said to the people over there, all the lawyers, said, don't worry, the Eruvin have been made for hundreds of years in hundreds of cities worldwide, and it never ever happened that traffic was stopped. And he convinced them, and Baruch Hashem to him, we'd signed a contract, and it went through. We got to the city goes out of the city into the county. Also, as we went to the county said, we showed them the contract from the city. He said, no problem. Now, one of our Rabbanim felt that we should go to the state also, because the state has a right to send in the National Guard into everyone's house. The city had a right to send the police and the fire department into anyone's house, and so did the county. But the state has even more power, and they, in a case of an emergency, and it's up to the governor to declare a state of emergency, he is the one who can send in the National Guard into anyone's house, certainly into the streets. So they have that right. So the governor said, I'll sell you the whole state. I have no problem with that. I can't take any money. So, I mean, it's got to have to do with money. So the question is, how do we do that? So this was a major problem. In the end, what we decided to do, with the permission of the governor, that we took a silver dollar and put it into the plaque which we presented to him, that for this silver dollar we will buy all the rent all the rights over here to the state. And he said, I hang up my office, it's not considered taking a bribe this way. And and that was the way that we got away with that. But there is it's not always so easy, and Baruch Hashem, the Baruch Hashem helped us, and not every place had it so easy to buy the rishus. It was easier to put up mechizas over the whole town than it was to buy the rishus from the mayor. Some mayors were afraid with the maybe I know what they were afraid of, but they were afraid to go along with it. Now in Europe, it was common to buy from the police, because the police were the final power, and they had the right to go into any place. Today, the police have only right after they get a warrant from the court, and the fire department also only has the right to go into a house if they get a warrant. However, if they suspect, but there's not a problem, because the warrant is basically a rubber stamp. They ask for it. They're not going to ask for going to a house without permission, without reason. So besides which, if the fire department suspects a fire, they see smoke coming out, where there's smoke, there's fire, they have a right to go in. And the police also, in case of emergency, have the right to go in. And so, but by us, this police department and the fire department are under the mayor, so therefore he has the right over them. So it was even better. So the Shulchan Aruch speaks at great length. If we couldn't get the guy to agree to rent the rishus, and what happens is he's not there on Shabbos. He could come on Shabbos if he's a Yid and he's not there, so then he doesn't answer. But if a guy's not there, since he could come back. If he won't come back, really, he doesn't answer. So when we're talking about making an area around a city, it is also the same concept, that that you need first mechizas around the city, and if chas v'shalom in the middle of Shabbos the mechizas get broken, a truck will drive into a telephone pole and break the lechi or knock down the pole or whatever. Immediately the area will become bottled. It doesn't help. You can't carry. However, because the mechitza became bottled, but if the Eruv for some reason was eaten in the middle of Shabbos or whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as Bein Hashmashah was there, it is good. Now the minig is that wherever you put the Eruv the first time, you leave it there forever. And when you make Eruv again, you put it in the same time. in order that people shouldn't come to fight and say, put into my place, put in the other place. What happens if they put into shul and the shul became obsolete for whatever reason, and now it's in an area where no one goes anymore, or they sold the place. So then, of course, there's a new place, so they'll have to work out between them where they're going to put it, and from then on it will always be put in the same place. Now there are a lot of halachas which about Eruvin which I did not discuss, and there's no way that it could all be discussed in this short period of time that we're allotted. But the main thing to remember is that the Eruv only helps in a place which is surrounded by mechitzas according to the halacha, even though they might not look, might not see any walls over here, but as long as from a halacha standpoint they're considered walls, like with the Tzuras HaPesach, and then it has to be done by being makna to everyone the chelik and eruv. So when you make an eruv Pesach, and it's going to last the whole year, you have to include that everyone who lives in this, every Yid who lives in this town, or who's going to move into this town in the next year, they should have a chelik in this eruv, and they should put it in a secluded place, to make sure that it remains intact for the whole year, and the eruv also remains edible for a whole year. Thank you, Rabbi Sai.